Raster and vector files. Two different types of image files have unique characteristics in the way they're created and used. This is just one aspect of digital imaging that is a really cool and complex subject, and I'm going to be giving you a basic overview of what they are, the best use cases for them, and why would anyone care about them. This is going to be an inside look of the chaos that goes inside my mind as a graphic designer on a daily basis, so let's get right to it. Let's start with raster graphics, the most common of the two. A raster image is made up of tiny squares called pixels. And these guys come together to form a complete image, whether it be a photo, a digital painting, or a texture design. One thing to keep in mind is that raster graphics are resolution dependent. So if you try to scale them up too much, they'll start to lose quality and get pixelated as a result. Some of the more common raster file types you'll find will be JPEGs, PNGs, and PSDs. Next, let's talk about vector graphics, which are a little more complex. Unlike raster graphics, vectors are made of paths rather than pixels. These paths are defined by math equations that tell the computer how to draw shapes, lines, and curves. Vectors are resolution independent. This means you can scale them up and down without any loss in quality. So whether you're designing a logo, web icons, or printed graphics, your images will stay nice and crisp. Some of the more common vector file types you'll find will be EPS, SVGs, and AI files, otherwise known as Illustrator files. So now that we understand the basics between raster and vector, let's break down the pros and cons between each, starting with raster graphics. So some of the pros you'll find is that you'll have full control over your color and detail, which makes them great for photography or complex artwork. They're also ideal for pictures that have a lot of textures, blending, and effects. Some of the cons can be that raster graphics don't scale that well, and if you try to enlarge them too much, they'll start to lose their sharpness and clarity. Also, high resolution raster images can take up a lot of storage space. Now, let's talk about vectors and their pros and cons. This is where it gets interesting. For the pros, vectors are perfect for logos, illustrations, and anything that needs to scale infinitely. When creating vectors, it can be easier to manipulate certain aspects such as color, shapes, and layers. As for the cons, complex vectors can be both time-consuming to make and slow down your workflow because your computer is constantly rendering the paths. And also, they're not as friendly to non-designers who need to view and work with them. So, when should you use raster or vector graphics? It really depends what you're working on. Here are some quick guidelines. Use raster graphics when you're working with detailed photos, textures, or complex artwork. For example, a product photo or a painted portrait is better suited as a raster image. Use vector graphics when you need something that scales across multiple sizes or when you're designing logos, icons, or simple illustrations. Both can be used together in different situations to get the intense effect of raster images, but also the scalability of vector elements. So here I'm going to show you guys how to create this album poster for Car, and I use both rasterized and vectorized assets. For the rasterized assets, we have this nice texture in the background which creates this nice gritty feel to it. And in terms of the vector assets, we have this text right here, we have some icons, and then we have the images. Now these images were originally rasterized as they were found online, and I converted them to vector through Illustrator's image trace feature. And this feature more or less tries to convert the images into vectorized versions of themselves, and it's not perfect, but for the purpose of this poster, I thought it turned out really great. I was able to manipulate the colors pretty easily and scale them up to the correct sizes. And yeah, the poster turned out great, and this is just one example of how I use both rasterized and vector images. So there you have it, raster versus vector images. Both have their strengths and their weaknesses, but it's important for you to know which works best in your workflow. Because there is this gray area where technically both can be used fine, but it really depends on what you're working with. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. So I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.